You're listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 111. Are you wanting to create a product in your business, but you're unsure what to expect? Today, we're going behind the scenes with the founder of an incredible business, and she is sharing her entrepreneurial journey, what the process was like creating her product, and her advice on how to engage your community in the process to create anticipation for your launch. So without further ado, let's jump on in. Hey there, I'm your host, Jessica Fergon, and I am passionate about doing the inner work needed to reach your goals. Let me be your guide as we navigate all the fears and insecurities that surface when it's time to step outside of your comfort zone. Along with my knowledgeable guests and industry experts, I'm here to teach you how to reawaken your life purpose and passion and create the steps to turn your intentions into action. Ultimately, my goal is to empower you to rise above those blocks holding you back and start living a life that you are worthy and deserving of. So come on, it's time to slow down, find a comfy spot with your favorite organic tea, and get inspired. Thank you for tuning in to the Love Unplugged podcast. Hello, loves. Today I am joined by the lovely Alexa Suter, founder of Huha, a company that has created a line of underwear designed with your vagina's health in mind using super breathable and soft cellulose fibers that are infused with zinc oxide, a naturally antimicrobial skin-soothing mineral. And I think that this is just brilliant, and I cannot wait to get myself a pair. So welcome, Alexa. I'm just so honored to have you as my guest. And I'm so excited to learn all about your story and advice. But before we start, for those that don't know you yet, I would love for you to share a little bit more about you personally.
Yeah, for sure. I was born and raised just outside of Vancouver, and I guess I would describe myself as a serial entrepreneur. You know, I kind of just since my early 20s, I've always had kind of business after business after business of my own. I've actually never had a full-time 9-to-5 job. So I guess I would say I'm a problem solver by nature, and I just love learning new things and kind of diving in and starting from the ground up and building.
Amazing. Now, serial entrepreneur, I kind of want to dive into that. What other businesses have you had before this one?
I know, a serial entrepreneur, it sounds so like chic. In reality, it's not at all. It's usually just sort of the outcome of somebody who wants freedom and, you know, wants to solve problems and just kind of gets obsessed with certain things to the point where they're somehow brave enough to actually build and go out there into the world. So, I mean, my story, like, I don't know how long we have, but my serial entrepreneur story, I mean, it's really all over the place. I would say my first love was writing. I started writing when I was like 14. And then that really led me into this place of like wanting to be creative. So I started going to school. I had like a part-time job. I was in university, but I hated it. And I hated being so cooped up, and I felt like I wasn't learning anything. And so I ended up dropping out of college, and I was like, okay, I'm going to become a realtor. I took like a hard left turn and I started selling real estate at the age 21. Incredibly tough business. I was like all on my own. I would pick up open houses from like older realtors, and I would try to get some mentorship. But ultimately, like, I was just out there in the world, you know, trying to find people who would trust me enough to work with me. During that year and a half, I think, even though it was incredibly tough, and I probably only ended up selling maybe between like 10 to 12 places, I learned a lot about negotiating. I learned a lot about being kind of in a sole proprietorship on your own. I learned kind of how to deal with people. And I ultimately learned that I was not made for that kind of a business, and that I just wanted to do something more creative. So I had never given up writing, and I decided to take another like right turn and kind of pivot back. And I started freelance writing, and that was really cool because it allowed me to travel. I like went to Europe and lived there alone for 6 months and just got to do so many cool trips, either solo or with friends. And that ultimately grew. And there's a couple other businesses I could dive into, but I don't want to kind of get too off track. So I'll let you maybe throw in the next question.
Amazing. So how did the idea for your current business come to be? Like, did you struggle with anything yourself where you needed this product so it just came to you that you needed to create it for yourself?
Yes and no. So I feel like with founder stories, we always want to like make it seem so neat and so like chronological. And in reality, that's not really how life works. At least not most of our lives. So I had it was kind of sort of like a serendipitous thing, because in 2016, I was starting my first product line business. It was something completely different. It was a line of silk skirts, and it was my first e-commerce platform. And during this time, I was experiencing like recurrent UTI infections. And I was also traveling a lot. So a lot of the times I was like just in a physical location that I couldn't really seek medical care. So I really kind of was like, I was in so much pain a lot. And I just tried to take it sort of onto myself to figure out, okay, what could be causing this? Like, is it what I'm eating? Is it how I'm washing my clothes? Is it what I'm wearing? And I actually had a journal and I was like tracking things. And ultimately I discovered that my underwear did play a large role in how I was feeling. And I noticed that synthetic fabrics really seemed to exacerbate my symptoms. And if I was wearing something natural like cotton, I just felt so much better. And so that was sort of like a nugget that I realized. And ultimately the UTI infections went away and I recovered and I was fine. Fast forward, I think maybe 2 years, and I was at a different point in my career where I was ready to take another leap into, a product-based business, because I had established a service-based business. I had an agency that was running well, and we had lots of clients, and I had my first 2 employees, and we had an office, and things were going really good. But again, I found myself in this place where I was like, I'm not totally fulfilled, I'm so grateful for the success. I'm so grateful to finally be at this place where I can afford certain things that I could never afford before. Like, that's really cool. But there's still this part of me that's like not completely fulfilled. And I think part of that was not having something tangible that I could say, I created this. Everything that I created in that business was digital. So I started just looking at different areas of my life and just kind of like starting from the ground up and researching like, where is there white space in the market right now? Like, what product needs to exist that doesn't exist? And I kept coming back to underwear. And I told my partner about it and he was like, you're crazy. Like, you want to leave your agency that's successful and start an underwear business? Like, what are you thinking? But it was just something I couldn't get out of my head. I would lie awake at night, just like dreaming up the perfect designs and thinking about all of the problems. And ultimately, when I really did the hard research and started reading up on fabrics and bacteria growth and how they're produced and how unsustainable they are, I just kept coming back to like, why are people making underwear for women with synthetics? Like, why is this happening? This needs to change. So that was ultimately it.
Interesting. UTIs are like the worst. I went through a period of time where I was getting them a little bit more frequently than I should. And it's like, if your underwear helps with that type of stuff, like, it's a godsend.
Yeah. I mean, it's super painful when you're dealing with it, right? And you get these like, you feel like you have to pee all the time. And it's like, oh, it's the worst.
It's
so really
frustrating.
Yeah. You like can't really function.
No, you can't concentrate on anything. Like,
no.
I would get like sweats because I'd be like panicking internally. Like, it's the worst feeling in the world. Like, well, for me, 100%. I'm sure that there's worse.
I actually have a really embarrassing story related to my UTI, like recurring problem back then. I actually like peed my pants in the lobby of my building because I was at a movie with a friend, and then I just started getting so much pain, and I was like, I need to go home. And I hopped in a cab and I like rushed home, and I was like, please get me there, like I'm going to explode. And I got into my lobby, and like the elevator was just taking forever. And I just couldn't handle the pain anymore. I'm like, I'd rather just pee my pants. So it happened.
Hey, that's totally fine. Like, you gotta go in that type of situation with that type of pain. I'm sorry, but it's happening.
Yeah, it's happening. You don't care about the embarrassment.
No.
It's like, yeah, next level.
Yeah. So let's dive into creating your business. So let's
Mhm.
break it down a little bit. So when you started your business, how did you decide exactly what you were going to offer? Did you already know you're going to do certain styles, certain colors? Like, did you have an idea of that? Did you bring your audience or your community in? Like, how did that all work?
So, I mean, I would say like you don't know everything right away. It's not like it just comes to you and one again, like the founder story, this narrative that we hear all the time. It doesn't really happen that way. And the way that it happened for me was I landed on underwear and I instinctively knew and intuitively knew that women hated their underwear, you know, and I knew I hated my underwear.
Mm-hmm.
So I started talking to people, but it was a really long process before, I stumbled on certain studies or I stumbled on certain manufacturers. I stumbled on certain pieces of information and knowledge from my community that I ended up building this premise and this brand. And it took about a year and a half before we had at least, some workable prototypes and before we launched the Kickstarter campaign. But to answer some of the specifics in your question, like, yes, I pulled my audience a lot. I, through a previous business had kind of built up this community on Instagram. So I was really lucky. I consider myself fortunate that I was able to leverage that community and just ask questions and just see what kind of styles people really like to wear, what kind of problems they found with their underwear. And a lot of those insights were ultimately shaped the products today.
So a year and a half, that's quite a long span to be coming up with your product. Did you take your community along with you in that journey of figuring it all out?
Oh, yeah.
How was that process? Did you like a lot of people say that you should take them on that journey of like when you're starting and stuff like that just to create the hype and all that stuff. So how was your experience with it? Did you enjoy it? Like did you get like a lot of value out of that?
Yes. I mean, when you're starting a product business, you can't afford to not start talking about it ASAP. And what I mean by that is you don't want to launch to crickets. Like you
Mhm.
don't want to have that experience of launching your e-commerce store or launching your brand and having zero sales or having one sale. That's going to be really hard to swallow. So the sooner you can start talking about it and start building up this interest, the better. And oftentimes I think people feel like it's way too premature. Like they're like, no, I'm not ready yet. Like I don't know. It's not even a real thing. Like, I don't know if it's going to work and all of these excuses that come up. But another sort of benefit to talking about it early on is that it really makes you keep your promises to yourself and to your audience, because
Mhm.
if you have this business that you're building, but you haven't told anyone about it, you can literally just have a bad day and be like, I'm throwing in the towel. Like, I'm not going to do it. And nobody would know. And you wouldn't even feel that bad about it because nobody knows. Like, so I think, as humans, it's really important for us to keep our word. And so that's just another tool that you can kind of bring to the table when you do have those bad days to be like, you know what, I'm going to keep going because I've told so many people about it. I've promised these things, people are excited. And so I found that really, really helped me.
That's such a good advice. I know someone who is in the beginning stages of like coming up with a product and whatnot, and they were always saying like, "Oh, I'm not quite ready to share it yet. I don't want to talk about it yet." But I'm kind of like, I think you should start talking about it and taking them on that journey of creating it, even though you're not quite like ready yet. Like, I think that's
100%.
important.
Send them this podcast, and I'll just say to that person, you have to be brave. You have to be really brave. You're going to have criticism. You're going to have people not believe in you. But it's going to feel so much better when you do break through and you do launch that business and you do get 100 sales right away. Then you can
Mm-hmm.
say to those people that didn't believe in you, well, you were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So be brave, put it out there, start talking about it. You don't have to start like a brand Instagram account and have your branding done and your color palette and your logo and all of that. You can just start where you can when you can. So the very easy like first step to take is to start telling your friends and family. and then start talking about it on your Instagram. You just your personal account, like throw up some Instagram stories, start polling people, start sharing tidbits. People really love that. So I would just say, like, start as soon as you can, where you can.
I love that. That's such a great line too. Now, with your actual fabric, the zinc infused fabric, like how did you find that? How did you create that? Like, what was the process in the actual development of your pieces?
It's a great question. And it was kind of serendipitous. It was probably, let's see, I want to say maybe like 6 months into development, which consisted of, just research, Pinterest boarding, talking to initial factories, looking at fabrics, looking at fabric swatches. And I had sought mentorship from a friend of mine who is the co-founder of a large clothing brand. And we were having lunch one day, and I brought some samples, and I still remember having these pieces of underwear in a restaurant on a table, and people would the server would come by, and she'd be like, what's going on here? And I was showing him, and he was, showing me so much support and just being like, yeah, like, this is awesome. This looks really great. And we started talking about fabrics, and I had stumbled upon Tencel, which is the brand name for lyocell, which comes from eucalyptus trees. It's more sustainable than cotton. It's more breathable. It's more like naturally kind of antimicrobial. And it was something that I really liked, and I was really set on using that. And then he started telling me about these other types of fabrics that existed that I previously had never known about. He started talking about fabrics that were made with seaweed and fabrics that had these really interesting benefits to them. And so I started researching after that meeting. I left, and I was just kind of buzzing, and I was thinking like, oh, this could really be like such a huge differentiator, because I've never seen underwear that have these proteins and these minerals and these benefits for the skin. All I see is like either synthetics that are made of lace or like cotton, and there's nothing really in between. So from there, I did the research on that particular seaweed fabric, and I ended up stumbling upon this zinc fabric. And when I was reading through the benefits of it, I was just like, yes, like, this marks all the boxes.
Crazy. So did you lead the charge with designing and then making sure that you were sourcing out the materials from your supplier and getting it all like put together? Like, how was that experience?
Yes, I was leading that charge. It was a long process. It was a really challenging process. It still to this day is a really challenging process. I think product development, when you're in a product business, is something that never ends.
Mm-hmm.
You think, oh, like, how long can it take to design underwear? And I'm really actually glad that I went into it with that level of naivety, because I don't think I would have done it if I would have known what a long and arduous process it would be. Again, I mentioned that it took 1.5 years just to have, our workable prototypes. And then it took another 6 months after that. So essentially how it went was like, this friend of mine who was mentoring me a bit, he would introduce me to factories. And then I would send over some ideas of what I wanted to create. And at first, I didn't even have like a tech pack or anything. A tech pack is essentially the DNA of how to create a product. So it will show sketches, it will show, your bill of materials with all of the materials that go into it. It'll show like a measurement chart, which is essentially your grading, which helps the factory create the pattern for you. So it's pretty essential to have when you're working with a factory, especially if you're not, working with a local factory, which I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, sourcing fabrics, every time you have a fabric you think you want to use, and you sample with that fabric, and then maybe you find a fabric that's better or superior, or maybe you find a problem with the initial fabric that you thought would be great. Like, every time you change any little thing, it maybe you get lucky and it doesn't negatively impact the design or the fit or the comfort. But more times than not, I found with every little tweak, there were 10 more tweaks to make after that. So it was just a really long process.
So having gone through all that and learning everything that you have, for somebody that is starting their path or their journey into creating a product, would you have any advice based on everything you learned?
Definitely. Again, I love to live off the model of do what you can, like, when you can. one thing I would really recommend, I can't speak to, any products that require like molds. Like I wouldn't know how to tell someone how to give advice for someone to create like a water bottle or jewelry, for example. But if someone is making, a garment, a clothing line of some sort, definitely what I would recommend is find a pattern maker. It can just be a tailor. It can be an individual who's a pattern maker and, a tailor to start working with you on your initial designs. Because what that will allow you to do is go to them with very kind of raw ideas and have them start making your initial prototypes that you can then fit on yourself and wear and wash and wear and, go through that process of deciding what you need to tweak and when.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you did what I did, which I didn't do right away, I actually did have a seamstress, in the very beginning make me underwear, but I just didn't find at that time that it was the right fit. And I thought I was so much further ahead in the process than I was. And I just jumped over and I started sampling with a manufacturer. But essentially what I'm trying to say is like the risk you run of, going to a manufacturer too soon is they're only going to want to do, I believe the standard is 2 samples, like before bulk.
Wow.
So you can imagine, like, that's not a lot. I've done hundreds of samples. So what you want to have before you go to the manufacturer is you want to know that it fits you perfect and that you're using the exact materials, if you can, or as close to the materials that you will in bulk. And then you also want to have your grading. So when you go to the manufacturer, you ask them for a prototype. You maybe do 1 or 2. It checks out. Then you do your size run. You fit it on all your sizes. You maybe make one tweak from there, and then you go into bulk.
Gotcha. That's quite the process.
Mm-hmm. It truly is.
I want to talk about your underwear specifically and get into the specifics of your pieces. So the fabric that your underwear is made from, let's go into that. Like, what is it exactly?
Yes. So the fabric that we use we actually use 2 fabrics. They're both cellulose fabrics, meaning they come from trees. So the lining fabric is our bread and butter. It is the tencel or lyocell, which comes from beech trees, and it has zinc oxide particles permanently embedded into the fibers. So that's where all the benefits come from in terms of, skin soothing, antimicrobial, extra absorption, extra breathability, and really cutting back on certain bacteria that would then cause odor and itch and maybe other things. So women really find that it helps for a slew of different things, but it's also just a great, like, why not product? Like, why not wear fabrics that are better for your body and allow your body to breathe? And then the main fabric, which goes on the outer portion of the underwear, is this really super soft micro modal, and that comes from beech trees. Actually, I can't remember. Did I say beech trees for lyocell? If I did, I meant eucalyptus.
Ooh, eucalyptus.
Eucalyptus. Yeah, sorry. I mixed that one up. But yeah, lyocell is eucalyptus and modal is beech trees.
Wow. Like, how do you even come across these fabrics? Like, that just blows my mind in general.
Yeah, I mean, they exist. They're out there. Modal is pretty common. People know about it. Tencel is less common. I think for a variety of reasons. It's not quite as soft, and customers love super, super soft fabrics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pricier, so it's less common to find. But yeah, they exist, and the zinc part of it is patented. So there's a patent holder out of Germany that owns it, and we work with a specialized mill in Taiwan to produce the custom form of it. That really works well in underwear.
So the zinc particles that are infused into that fabric, even through washing and wear and like however long you have your underwear for, it doesn't diminish?
It does diminish a little bit, but it stays effective. We've tested it up to 100 washes, and I mean, the way that it diminishes is just so small. Like it's almost just as effective as when you first pull it out of the packaging. So, I mean, obviously these tests are expensive. So we've only so far tested up to 100 washes, but I would imagine that it probably remains effective for the lifetime of the garment.
That's crazy. Now, what are the actual benefits that we can experience?
Well, as a disclaimer, we're not a medical product. We don't prescribe our underwear for UTI infections or yeast infections. What you can expect is more breathability, more moisture wicking, because the fibers breathe so well and the zinc adds to extra absorption. Women constantly comment on like, these are so great for working out in, like I'm usually soaked and my underwear stay wet throughout the day, and like these dry so fast. They also dry when you wash them and you hang them to dry, they dry so fast. So that's definitely something you'll notice. Many women also comment on odor. Again, so because the zinc interacts with these bacterias and mitigates these bacterias that would commonly be growing in like a nylon or a polyester, for example, you may notice this in less odor. You may also notice less itch, because lots of itch is also caused by particular bacteria. So there's a lot of just sort of comfort and lifestyle benefits that you will notice. We also have an industrial design pending on our lining design, because actually when I was initially designing the underwear, this was one of my main ideas, was that I just found it odd that women's underwear, just the lining, like the tiny little gusset, it seems strange to me that there wasn't more coverage there, especially
Yes.
in thongs. I'm like, why
Oh my
doesn't
God,
the
yes.
lining ever extend back? Why is it just this tiny little triangle of like 2 inches? Like, what's going on here? So in our underwear, and particularly in our thong, you'll notice that there is a full coverage lining that goes all the way up to the waistband in the front and all the way back to the tailbone in the back. And therefore there's no like uncomfortable seams. I worked really, really hard in the initial stages getting this particular stitch. And it's funny when I talk to like designers and like technical designers, I'll be like, you have no idea like how much I cried over this stitch, like trying to get this right. And the reason why it was so important to get this particular stitch is because it rests on your most precious, delicate parts. And if it's rubbing, like a lot of stitches are really abrasive on the inside, and they can cause chafing and rubbing and discomfort. And I'm super sensitive to that. So this particular stitch does not do that, which is amazing.
Amazing. I have a couple of those underwear where I'm just like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. This stitch, I can feel it, and it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think so many of us have almost become like desensitized to how uncomfortable our underwear is.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess as women, just in general, we're wearing high heels and we're like, underwire bras, and it's like we just kind of expect things to be uncomfortable. And so many women, wearing our underwear now comment, they're like, I had no idea how uncomfortable my underwear were before. And after wearing yours and then going back to my old ones, like I can't do it. I'm switching over to you now.
Oh, that's amazing. That's such great feedback to hear after all the work that you've done. Oh, that must feel good.
It is good feedback. 100%. It does feel good.
So how do you care for your products? So do you use detergent? Do you hand wash? Do you put it in the washing machine? Do you hang dry? Do you tumble dry? Like, what is the best way to care for them?
So we actually recently came out with an all-natural undie wash. It's a detergent, so it could be used on any clothes, but we call it undie wash. And it has no bad chemicals in it, and it's just super gentle on fibers. So of course we would recommend using that, but if not, definitely recommend natural. Natural washes are always better, especially for your body, because a lot of deodorants are actually known to have EDCs in them. So they're like endocrine disrupting chemicals, and they're hormone disrupting essentially. So they can cause a lot of issues, science pending, of course, as it usually is with women's issues. But definitely recommend anything natural when you can. And then we recommend a gentle cycle, in the wash and hanging to dry. A lot of women don't like the fact that they we recommend, hanging our underwear to dry. You can put them in the dryer, but we just always recommend, because they are cellulose fabrics, they're a little bit more, they're just a little bit more sensitive by nature, and like
Mm-hmm.
it kind of sucks because we know that this is the right thing to do. And it's like, yes, it's an inconvenience to have to hang dry things from time to time, but synthetics aren't great for your body and they're not great for the planet. And those underwear might last 20 years, but that's because they're not going to break down. Like it might take hundreds of years for those things to break down. So, it's a bit of a trade-off, but I think so far, at least 90% of our customers think it's worth it.
I mean, you hang dry your nice bras and any nice clothes. I mean, I hang dry all my nice shirts and pants and stuff like that, so I don't see an issue with it for me.
Exactly, right? And that's something we're trying to the messaging that we're trying to put out there. Like, why do we consider our underwear so much as like an afterthought? And just why do we abuse it so much? Why can't we just treat it like any of our other delicates?
Exactly. And there's so many times that I've like pulled my stuff out of the dryer and my like thong is completely wrapped around like so many different like pieces like towels and all that stuff, and it's so stretched out. So
yeah, and there's like clumps of hair in there,
oh
and it's
god,
all tangled up and lint, and yeah.
yes. I mean, if you're gonna spend the money on some good quality underwear, I figure that you might as well take the extra
Yeah,
2 seconds to hang them.
just hang them up. Don't abuse them in the dryer.
So let's get back to your business. So we know how the product development started, but let's talk about the other aspects of starting a business. Did you have a business plan? What was the flow of the different things that you did from like starting your product development, your branding, like all those types of things?
I wouldn't say I had a business plan starting out. I did have sort of a mental plan of how I envisioned things going. And one thing I knew I wanted to do from the get-go was a crowdfunding campaign. And I knew that I wanted to do that because I understood the risk involved in starting a product business. Product business does require upfront investment to buy your inventory. And if you don't have high confidence that people are going to buy it, it's just a risk. So I decided that I wanted to do a Kickstarter campaign, and my whole idea behind that was if the Kickstarter campaign is successful, then I'll have the confidence to know that my product has been validated and people want to buy it and people are willing to actually pay for it, because you might be getting such great feedback like from your friends and family and social media community, but until people are willing to pull out their wallet, you just can't be sure. So that went well and it was successful, and it kind of led to the launch of the business. To answer your question about like branding, that was tough.
Really?
That was really tough. Yeah.
Why?
I think because it's so hard when you have this sort of high level, like conceptual feel for what you want a business and a brand to be, and to put that into visuals, particularly when you don't have like a nailed down product yet, and you're also not 100% sure who's going to buy that product, it's just challenging. And what I found, like I'm extremely picky, so maybe this is just me. I'm like so neurotic, but I probably went through like at least like 25 logos until I was like, yeah, okay, let's just do this one. Yeah. And I think my learning from that, which I had experienced in other ways in the past in business, is the more you love your logo like right away, the more you're going to hate it in like 2 weeks. And I think the reason for that is like extremes. Like you just change your mind. And so you want to be in this really like sweet spot where you see the logo and you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's interesting, And it's not like an immediate, yes, I love this. This is awesome. It's definitely not ew, that's awful, but it's just kind of somewhere in the middle. And then what ends up happening is it ends up growing on you. So you want to be able to make a decision where it's something you're going to like more with time and not less.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I'm the same way where if I'm like super loving something within like a week or so, I'm just like doubting it. I'm questioning
Mm.
whether I made this right decision. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't look as good as I initially thought. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, I wonder why that is.
I
It's
know,
it's
right?
definitely a phenomenon. I don't know if it's maybe a brain chemistry thing. Like maybe if something is so novel, you get this big hit of dopamine and it's so cool, but then it's that once that kind of wears off, you get the reality of it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I've often wondered about why that seems to be a real thing.
So now what has helped you stay consistent and move the needle forward in your business? How'd you stay organized with all the tasks that you were juggling with all these different responsibilities that you were taking on in your business and be able to focus and actually like see your business take off?
You know, there's something to be said for like momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what keeps me consistent and working hard is the momentum. Um, I'm the type of person, and I've experienced this in business in the past. If I don't feel that momentum, I can be really like down on myself, and I can be really inconsistent, and I can be really lazy. But with Huha, I think I don't know. It's just there's just been this momentum with Huha that every day, there's something really good in every day, whether it's a new 5-star review or a new sales high for the day, or a new wholesaler, or just new growth on social media, or someone talking about us in the press, or like there's always just something really good in every day. And I think that this is something that we can all accomplish. And somebody actually said to me early on after the Kickstarter had ended and we finally got our first shipment in after going through production during the height of coronavirus at the beginning of the year. And, we had packaged like all of the orders, and I think there were about like 500 of them. And just, I took this photo with all of the packages like laid out in our office, like just all over the floor. And I was like laying next to it. And it was just this moment where I was like, wow, like to see something on paper or on a screen that says like, oh, like 500 orders. It's like, you don't really know what that means, but then to see it visually, it's so different. And a friend said to me, she's like, just keep this momentum going. And I've always come back to that because I think there's really something to be said for that. Like when you get this ball rolling, you've been pushing it uphill for so long, and then you kind of reach a point and it starts rolling on its own. But you have to keep pushing it and keep it rolling. And it kind of gets easier in some ways. But I think, we always have to be very aware that like, success isn't final.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you've reached a point of success doesn't mean you can kick up your feet and kind of sit back and get lazy, because things do change. So I've just always come back to that, like that piece of advice about keep the momentum going and look for that momentum every day. And if you of course there are days where I'm like, oh, okay, sales are down today, got a negative review, things don't seem to be going great today. What can I do? Like, what could I do today to get, 10 new followers, or to get 5 more sales, or to, like what is within my power? And I think coming back to that question every day has really, really helped. And it's been really cool to just see like, oh, like hopping on Instagram stories and like talking about this, or like sending out an email campaign, or like doing anything that's really within my control, just to see that it actually does have an impact is really empowering and really cool.
I so resonate with that. I think it's so important to take action to get that momentum going, because once that momentum is going, like you're unstoppable, right? Like it's going to inspire you to keep going and to keep taking more action and whatnot. It's just like the ball is just going to keep going and you're just going to follow along. And when
Yeah.
I don't take action for like a few days and things kind of settle or get stagnant and whatnot, that's when I start feeling like really down on myself. That's when I start like questioning things. That's when I get super lazy, which I have a tendency to get lazy if I'm not taking action. But it's crazy how it's so absolutely critical to to take daily action, to keep yourself moving. Like that makes such a difference.
100%. And some days it's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's always one thing that we could do in our business on any given day to have a positive impact. Even if that means like, you know what, I'm feeling so depressed today. I'm just going to crawl in bed and like watch Dragon's Den on my laptop. You know, that's
Yeah.
something positive because you're learning things and you're becoming inspired. And yeah, it's sometimes you don't always see the results immediately, but I think once you have that momentum going, it's like you just realize how every day really matters and every action is super important.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did you struggle with most starting your business, and how did you overcome it on a personal side? You know, was it navigating the unknown, getting into the uncomfortable zones, you know, negative self-talk, doubts, fears? Like, what was that for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I cried a lot over underwear. And I wasn't crying because the underwear wasn't perfect. It was, I think psychologically what was happening for me for a while was, you know, I would get this sample back, and of course it's coming from overseas. When we were first sampling, we were also sampling in India. So it takes weeks, if not months, to get a sample back. And then I would open it and I would put it on, and immediately I would just be like, no, this isn't right. This isn't what I wanted. And then I think what would happen, it would be like this like negative part of me would be like, oh, see, I told you so. Like, you can't do this. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not a designer. Like, you didn't go to fashion school. You don't know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, negative self-talk for sure. And just, I would just say like overall, like just to kind of put an umbrella or to underscore it, it's like starting a business is emotionally difficult. That's actually the biggest challenge of it. On paper, objectively, starting a business isn't really that hard. What's hard about it is our emotions and how we get in our own way and how we take things so personal and how we get just so personally wrapped up and our insecurities come out and our past traumas come out. That's the hardest part about it. If it wasn't for that, I think everybody could be a very successful business owner, and maybe everybody can be.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so important to always look at starting a business as you're going to have to do some personal inner work. You're going to have to grow on a personal level in order to see your business grow and to stay with it.
Oh, hell yeah, sister.
It's like an aligned journey, right? They go hand in hand, and you really just have to work on both.
Oh, yeah. 100%. You have to be brave and face your fears every day.
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds scary, but, you know, when things are going well, it's awesome.
Exactly. I never realized that until about probably year 2 into mine. And I was like, what is going on? Like, these are things that I was never even worried about before. And I didn't really care about this. And I'm just like crippling with fear and like all that type of stuff. And I'm like, this is so crazy. And then I realized, you know, I need to work on these things that were like beneath the surface that I didn't even know were there in order to get better in my business and to show up stronger in my business as well.
That's the thing, right? It's like entrepreneurship, I think, is a commitment to endless self-development and improvement. Mm-hmm. And if that's something that excites you, then I would recommend it. Like it is super rewarding. Mm-hmm. I mean, and we have to have those really low moments in order to appreciate the really good moments in order to be able to see our own growth, I think.
Now, daily, what do you do to set yourself up for success? Like, do you have any morning routines, or, you know, what do you start on in your business at first? Like, do you look at emails, or do you like organize your to-do list, or is there certain tasks that you like prioritize because you're, you know, more alert in the morning?
You know, to be totally honest with you, I'm not a big fan of structure. I'm not a big fan of like confinement and rigid rules. Mm-hmm. Which I think is why I always knew I wouldn't fit into like this 9 to 5. Like, what if one day I want to work noon to 8 or 6 to midnight, or, you know what I mean? So I am way more consistent than I give myself credit for, but I think my consistency comes from the amount of freedom that I give myself. So I know that I I don't have to, I don't force myself to wake up to an alarm, but I still choose to do it. I don't force myself to make a to-do list and check it off, but most days I still do it. So I just kind of like allowing myself to be human. And I find that that actually makes me more productive because I'm able to sort of be fluid. So if I wake up, for example, and I'm like not feeling very great energetically, I might choose to like push off a meeting and hop on the Peloton and like get some more energy before I start my day. Or if I wake up with a great idea, I might like be in my house coat and just go straight to the computer and like start working on something right away and like not come up for air until it's lunch. So there are certain things that I do find helpful from a more practical standpoint. And some of those things are journaling. If I could have it an ideal world, I would journal every morning. I don't. Sometimes I'm better than other times, but I find that, starting my day that way of just like, maybe I just want to journal out like what's on my mind or my fears or some dream that I had or some memory that I recalled, or I just find it's like a really good reset. Another thing that I highly recommend that I recently started doing was not sleeping with my phone right next to my head, which most of us do.
Yeah.
And I've done for many, 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 many years. And I've always told myself like, oh, I have the, self-discipline to like not pull up my email, first thing, like as soon as I open my eyes. But the reality is that I don't. And that's what I've been doing. So I've started now putting my phone on a coffee table that's just like slightly away from the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And that just like, I actually find makes such a difference because it just like gives me that few moments in the morning to make a better choice rather than like automatically reaching for my phone. I can just lay there and be like, okay, like this is what I want to get done today. Like this is what I'm grateful for. And then I'll go downstairs and like make a coffee. And so sometimes I won't look at my phone now for like the first hour of the morning. And I think mornings are such like a vulnerable time. So the more that you can sort of protect your confidence and, just your soul in the morning, the better and stronger you'll be throughout the day.
I like that advice. That's something that I'm trying to work on, is keeping my phone away from me when I'm sleeping so that I don't grab for it in the morning.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Just put it slightly away and you'll notice that even just like the way I looked at it at first, because it is hard, is like, even if it's just the first 10 seconds of every day, hey, that's 10 seconds. Like it's something, So yeah, highly recommend.
How many people are in your team? Is it just you?
It's just me. I'm still running another business, which is the agency. I have one full-time employee on that side, and we have a part-time employee on that side. And of course, there's some crossover there. So there are things that she helps out with on Huha and vice versa. But yeah, it's primarily just me. And I've been doing a lot of outsourcing, which has been great. So I have somebody who runs Facebook ads, and I have a technical designer, and I have a pattern maker, and then of course like the manufacturing team. That's pretty much it. Oh, and a graphic designer as well.
So that's still quite a bit of responsibility on your shoulders, having to manage all that. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with creating boundaries in your life so that you're not leading to a burnout?
Tough one. I mean, burnout is like an interesting topic, I find, because I find burnout usually, in my experience, kind of occurs from like just not being totally aligned with what you're doing. And for me, I've found it's less about like the hours that I'm putting in and more about the alignment. So for example, like in my previous business, every single task that I had to do, I had this internal resistance. So I had to like first overcome that resistance, then do the task, then feel exhausted because it wasn't something that I wanted to do in the first place. And so it was almost like every single task, even if it was like just a few, was like this huge mountain to overcome. So I've found that with Huha, just being so aligned and only really doing things every single day that I want to do, and also having that momentum has like, I don't really feel like I get burnout. I get tired, but my mind never really gets tired. So yeah, I mean, maybe that's not super helpful, but that's kind of what I've experienced so far.
Gotcha. Now, what is on the table for Huha in the future? Do you have anything new coming out that you want to share with anyone?
We do. We have our third style coming out. The launch date is still to be determined, just pending holiday shipping craze. We still need to confirm that, but it is happening for sure within the next 1 to 3 months. And that's a high-rise brief style. So that will mean we have 3 styles: thong, cheeky, and brief. We also are working on some really cool new designs. So we're working on this like low profile thong. Our thong is our best seller, so we want to make more thongs. And this one sort of mimics like a seamless style that you might buy from like La Senza or like Victoria's Secret. And this is something that people have really wanted to see us make because, of course, like there's certain things that you just need a seamless underwear for.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so hard to do with natural fibers. But we've somewhat mastered that. So really excited for that one to come out. And then we're also sampling 3 different bralette styles right now. So that'll be next up. You can get some matching bralettes with your undies. And then there's one more that is going to be crazy and I know is going to be a huge game changer for so many women that I'm really excited about. It's a patented design. I can't really talk about it too much, but I will say that it's a bodysuit. And it's a bodysuit that is going to be focused on underwear and it's going to change the bodysuit game. It's going to like rock your world if you love bodysuits.
Interesting. I can't wait. That sounds awesome. Super excited about the bralettes, that's for sure, because I hate wearing bras now.
Right? Underwire bras are gone.
Oh my God. Ever since COVID hit and now we're all working from home and we can be a lot more comfortable. Every time I have to put on a wire bra, I'm like, oh, this is horrible.
I know. I mean, I have a small chest, so I don't really like have to, but I look into my drawer and I'm like, maybe I should just get rid of these for good because I haven't touched them in like 2 years.
Totally. Now, if anybody wants to learn more about you, which they should, where can they connect with you? Where do you hang out the most?
Probably on Instagram. It's just my first and last name, Alexa Suter. I'd also love if they followed Huha. It's Wear Huha, so it's WEARHUHA. We do a lot of fun stuff on there. So those are the 2 that are most prominent.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alexa, for taking the time to join us and for sharing how we can take so much better care of our vagina's health, and for also sharing your journey starting your business and the key learnings that you had along the way. I know so many people are going to benefit from learning from your experience.
Thank you so much for the great questions and for having me on the show.
I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.